A mysterious opening on the ocean floor was detected and a deep-sea submarine was sent on a daring mission to study the opening. That is when they discover an underwater world containing an ancient race of otherworldly beings that were awakened. The opening scene of the movie shows a group of men wearing a biohazard suit leaving a mysterious box after reporting to Dr. Goldstein. Dr. Julia Goldstein smiled as she looked at the live footage of a mysterious opening on the ocean floor that looked like a portal. Dr. Goldstein visited a researcher named Jim Peters who works as an astrobiologist at Miskatonic University. Jim seemed uninterested after hearing that Julia works for Pickman Corporation, but he was impressed when he learned that Pickman Corporation is selecting candidates for an expedition. Dr. Goldstein told Jim about the research they have been doing in the Antarctic and Southern Atlantic Oceans for the past 7 years. They had mapped a trench located on the Antarctic continental shelf, where they found the deepest point of the ocean at 37,000 feet. Dr. Goldstein then showed Jim footage of the portal-like opening on the ocean floor. She explained that the expedition's purpose is to enter the portal-like opening and study whatever is inside it. Jim agreed, as he was also interested in finding out what lay within that portal-like opening that seemed to be man-made. Jim attended a meeting where he met his new team. He was introduced to Gordon Atkins, head of the Manned Submersible Laboratory at London's Royal Society for Improving Natural Knowledge, Christine Harris, a marine biologist and member of the European Marine Biology Symposium, and Joseph Meeker, the Safety and Communications Officer. And lastly, Hank O'Connell, the lead engineer for Providence 3, a deep-diving submersible that is 250 tons, built with syntactic foam, and capable of withstanding huge compressive forces of the water at 37,000 feet and below. Christine was worried about this expedition when she learned they're going into the opening because it is very risky. But Dr. Goldstein and Hank reassured her that Providence 3 can take it and this expedition would be successful. Jed Pickman suddenly spoke up from behind the group. He gave a speech about how this opening demands to be explored and how the opening might become their greatest discovery. After the meeting, the team was eating together and getting to know each other when Christine excused herself. Jim followed her to see if she was all right, and Christine admitted that she knows who Jim is. She knew Jim because of her infamous father, who went on an expedition for Pickman Corporation, and after his great discovery, he suddenly disappeared without any trace. Christine told Jim about her son, Sam, and expressed her worry that she might not come back from the expedition to watch her son grow. 2 months later, the team was done with their 2-month training and was ready to go on the expedition. They entered the expedition along with Pickman, who had wanted to come with them to see for himself just what lies beneath that portal-like opening. There were a bit of complications along the way, but their journey to 37,000 feet below was a success. The team gathered around as they watched the opening in astonishment. They were confused at how the opening got there. The opening seemed man-made, but they were unsure as it was too deep in the ocean. Gordon slowly drove Providence 3 into the opening when they felt a sudden tremor that prompted Providence 3 to shut down. The team lost connection with Dr. Goldstein's team on the surface, and Christine was worried when she noticed the submersible was still sinking. Then the submersible started working again as if nothing had happened. The team was shocked when they found out from Rachel that they had lost communication with the surface for 3 hours. The team felt as if they had lost power for only minutes and were confused that they had actually lost contact for 3 hours and 12 minutes. Hank checked their life support and found that it decreased approximately 3 hours, causing more suspicion to the team. The team looked ahead of them and was astonished to see a huge ancient ruin. They described what they were seeing as Rachel and her team couldn't see it due to a lot of static interference. There were decayed stone structures that looked man-made all around them. This caused huge confusion and suspicion as it seemed like there had been life down there, but that idea seemed impossible as it was too deep into the ocean. There is only darkness and no sunlight below. They noticed something huge and weird on the seabed, and upon taking a closer look, they were even more shocked when they saw it look like some kind of life form. Christine stated that it's the remains of some creature buried under centuries of sediment buildup, and Dr. Goldstein ordered Jim to get closer to the deep-sea organism and get some tissue samples. Using the rover, Jim approached the organism and took a tissue sample with the others watching from Providence 3. Looking at the organism closer, Jim knew that whatever it was colossal, and it instilled fear inside him as he started taking tissue samples. Meanwhile, Christine was pointing out how the organism seemed like it hadn't deteriorated, and Joe wondered how long it had been dead. Suddenly, they saw a movement from the rover's rear cams. Their radar started reading a massive life form, and Christine told Gordon to tell Jim to get back to Providence 3. But Joe demanded the opposite as they needed the tissue sample. Once Jim was done with the incision, Gordon told him to come back to the submersible when they suddenly lost signal. Then fear seeped into their bodies as they watched the colossal organism with wings stand to its full height, letting out an inhuman wail. Gordon requested permission to abort, but Dr. Goldstein denied it as she was desperate for that tissue sample. Gordon was panicking, and Joe decided to take the wheel and put the submersible down so Jim could return immediately. Meanwhile, Pickman encountered a silhouette of a non-human creature that looked like him. On the other hand, Christine rushed to the pressure dock and told Hank to fill it with water for Jim's return. When the colossal creature reached out to the submersible, Gordon had to make a sudden reverse that caused another tremor on Providence 3, sending Christine into the pressure dock. Before Gordon could open the outer doors to let Jim's rover enter, Hank told him to stop, as doing so would blast Christine into the ocean. He opened the inner doors and Joe helped him pull Christine out of the pressure dock filled with water. The pressure dock was closed and Jim boarded Providence 3. Joe tries to save Christine, but after a while of her not responding, they assume that she has died and give up trying to save her. Meanwhile, Gordon was struggling to dodge the colossal creature, causing damage to the submersible, and water started leaking in. Hank checked the bunk rooms, and seeing them flooded, he told Gordon to drop weights before the water dragged them down. Since Gordon was still in the pressure dock, he waited 5 seconds before dropping weights. Hank, though, had sealed the corridor but couldn't get the second door closed, so he was unable to prevent water from coming in. He couldn't get out either, and sooner or later, the bunk he was in would flood and he would drown. He begged Pickman to open the door for him, but the mad researcher just watched him as he died. Jim is back in Providence 3 and panicked when he saw Christine's lifeless body. He performed CPR on her, not listening to Joe when he told him she's dead, and after pumping for a while, Christine coughed out water and Jim embraced her. The submersible had successfully left the ancient ruin and was on its way back to the surface. Jim suggested sealing the tissue sample he took in the pressure lock, as they have no idea what it is and they're afraid they might be exposing themselves to something that can potentially kill them. But Pickman demanded to take the sample to the lab. Christine and Jim decided to supervise to make sure that the sample would be kept contained. Pickman was amazed when a slimy tentacle crawled out of the sample as if it could feel them. Jim led Pickman out of the lab, and Christine covered the glass box with the sample before sealing the lab. Pickman discovered that Dr. Goldstein was planning to take the sample for herself, and Joe was in on the plan. So while everyone was busy, Pickman entered the lab and took his clothes off, putting his hands on the sample and rubbing his body with its slime. Jim and Christine were changing when Jim suddenly got hysterical. He revealed that whatever they encountered in the ancient ruin caused him to hallucinate. Christine held Jim's cheeks and comforted him to calm him down. They finished putting their clothes back on when they heard Gordon scream. They ran to check what happened but noticed the state the open lab was in. Christine closed the lab but then accidentally touched a slimy fluid which she realized belonged to the sample. Then Pickman appeared, seemingly posing, and let out an inhuman screech before falling into the pressure dock. Christine and Jim tried to open the pressure dock to save Pickman, but Joe told them not to as he pointed a gun at them. He revealed that Pickman already knew beforehand what they were dealing with. Pickman had already spent years researching the ancient ruin beneath the opening before they were sent on an expedition. Their objective wasn't to see what was inside the opening, it was to get a sample of a living organism and get rich. Christine tried to knock some sense into Joe, explaining that the organism wasn't just existing physically, it's growing, and it's having a strange psychological effect on the crew. But Joe didn't listen, and Jim told Christine to let him go, as agitating him might put them in more danger. When they heard Gordon retching, they went to him and found that he was already affected by the sample. Gordon stood there, looking at them strangely as he spoke in a voice that sounded exactly like Jim's father. It is revealed that Jim's father had tried to warn Pickman about the opening, but no one listened to him, and that's when he disappeared. Gordon attacked Jim, and Jim struggled to keep him away before he was sent falling, rendering him unconscious. Gordon destroyed everything around him, causing the submersible to malfunction and losing contact with DP control. Meanwhile, Joe took parts of the tissue sample to give to Dr. Goldstein once they returned to the surface before facing Gordon. Seeing how Gordon was, Joe fired and killed him. Joe planned on taking the rover and leaving Christine and Jim behind. Once Joe turned his back on her, Christine grabbed the axe and hit Joe's hand with it, causing him to drop the gun, which fell beside Jim. Christine fought against Joe, and once he was done, she stabbed Joe's leg with the axe before running to Jim, who had just woken up. She opened the pressure dock and entered the rover, expecting Jim to follow her in so they could leave. But Jim grabbed the gun and went to the lab to destroy the tissue sample so they wouldn't risk someone else finding it. Before returning to the pressure dock, he encountered the silhouette that possessed Pickman. Jim returned to the pressure dock and told Christine to go without him as one of them needed to stay behind and seal the pressure dock. Joe then appeared, attacking them with the axe, and Jim lured him away from the pressure dock before shooting him. Jim watched in horror as tentacles came out of Joe's body, and he shot the tentacles before going back to the pressure dock. He sealed the pressure dock and opened the outer doors to let Christine out, sliding down the wall as he accepted his fate. When he heard his father's voice, he approached the silhouette and Jim called out to his father as everything burned around him. After escaping Providence 3, Christine was unconscious for a couple of days before she woke up in a hospital. Dr. Goldstein explained to her that they picked up the rover's signal after losing contact with the submersible. That's when they found Christine drifting and took her to the hospital. Christine was furious as she screamed at Dr. Goldstein for sending her team to their deaths. Suddenly, she felt an excruciating pain in her stomach and she was terrified when she remembered accidentally touching the tissue sample's slimy fluid. She applauded Dr. Goldstein for getting exactly what she wanted before falling back down on the bed, thrashing around as she laughed maniacally. Dr. Goldstein and the nurses holding Christine down watched in horror as tentacles cut through Christine's stomach.